They sold me like I was nothing. Please save me. The cries of the woman traded by her tribe. She was born in a quiet tribal village surrounded by dry hills and long stretches of open land. Life there moved slowly, following traditions that were older than anyone could remember. From childhood, she was taught that the tribe was her world. The people were her family, the elders were her guides, and the customs were the rules that kept everyone safe. She believed this deeply. To her, the tribe was not just a group of people, it was protection, identity, and belonging. Every morning, she woke up before the sun rose. She helped her mother with daily chores, collected water, prepared food, and took care of younger children in the family. These tasks were never questioned. She had seen her mother and grandmother do the same, so she believed this was how life was meant to be. There was comfort in routine, even if the work was hard. At night, she would sit outside with other women, listening to stories about ancestors, bravery, and loyalty. Those stories shaped her understanding of right and wrong. She was known as a quiet and kind young woman. She spoke respectfully, followed rules, and never argued with elders. People often said she was well-raised. Hearing this made her feel proud, because respect from the tribe meant everything. She believed that if she lived honestly and obediently, the tribe would always stand by her. That belief was her strength, and later it would become her deepest pain. As she grew older, she noticed that men and women lived very different lives. Men attended meetings, made decisions, and traveled outside the village. Women stayed back, managed homes, and accepted what was decided for them. She did not fully understand why things were this way, but she accepted it. Questioning traditions was not encouraged. Silence was considered wisdom. Despite this, she had dreams, simple ones. She dreamed of a peaceful future, of building a family with care, of being treated with kindness. Sometimes she imagined a life where her voice mattered too, but these thoughts were private. She never shared them because she knew dreams that went against tradition were often seen as disrespectful. Her father was a respected man in the tribe. He rarely spoke at home, but when he did, everyone listened. She believed his strength would always protect her. Her mother, though gentle, often looked tired. Sometimes, late at night, the woman noticed her mother staring into the darkness, as if worried about something she could not say. At the time, she didn't understand those silent moments. Slowly, changes began in the village. There were whispers among the elders. Meetings lasted longer. Strangers came and went. The tribe was facing problems, financial pressure, disputes with nearby groups, and internal disagreements. These issues were discussed only among men and elders. Women were not included, and she never knew the details. She only sensed tension in the air, like a storm building far away. One evening, she overheard a conversation while passing near the gathering place. Her name was mentioned, followed by sudden silence. She stopped walking, her heart beating fast. She wanted to listen, but fear held her back. She told herself it must be nothing. The tribe would never harm her. They were her people. Days passed, but a strange distance grew between her and others. Some women avoided eye contact. Some spoke to her with forced kindness. Elders watched her closely, as if measuring her. She felt confused, but no one explained anything. Asking questions was not her habit, so she stayed quiet, hoping things would return to normal. At home, her father became more serious. Her mother spoke less. Meals were eaten in silence. The woman felt an invisible wall forming around her, though she didn't know why. She tried to be more helpful, more obedient, thinking she might have done something wrong. But no one corrected her, no one reassured her. One afternoon, an elder woman visited their home. She spoke in low tones with her parents while the young woman prepared tea nearby. She heard words like agreement, future, and responsibility. Her hands shook as she poured the tea. A cold feeling settled in her chest. Something important was happening, and she was not part of it. That night she could not sleep. Her thoughts raced. She remembered stories where sacrifices were made for the greater good of the tribe. Those stories were always told with pride. She had admired those who accepted difficult fates for the sake of others. But now, fear crept into her heart. What if she was expected to do the same? She tried to convince herself that whatever decision was being made would be fair. After all, the elders were wise, weren't they? They had guided the tribe for generations. They wouldn't hurt her. Trust had been planted in her since childhood, and it was hard to pull it out, even when doubt appeared. The next morning, her mother looked at her with eyes full of emotion, sadness, fear, and something else she couldn't understand. The woman asked if everything was okay. Her mother smiled weakly and said yes, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. That was the moment the woman felt something break inside her. She realized that the truth was being kept from her. Still, she went about her day. She worked, she listened, she obeyed. But inside, she felt smaller, like she was slowly disappearing. She wondered if her life truly belonged to her or if it had always belonged to the tribe. She thought about the meaning of trust. She had trusted without question. She had believed without proof. Now she stood at the edge of a reality she did not understand, sensing that her future was being shaped without her consent. The tribe she loved so deeply was preparing to decide her fate, and she had no idea how much her life was about to change. This was the beginning. The calm before everything shattered. The days after that uneasy feeling passed slowly, but something heavy stayed in the air. The young woman could feel it in the way people spoke to her and in the silence that followed her wherever she went. She tried to tell herself she was imagining things, yet deep inside, she knew her life was no longer moving in a direction she understood. Meetings among the elders became more frequent. Men gathered early in the mornings and stayed late into the evenings. Whenever she came close, the conversation stopped. Doors closed, eyes turned away. No one explained anything to her and no one asked how she felt. It was as if her presence reminded them of something uncomfortable. One afternoon, she finally gathered the courage to ask her mother what was happening. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. Her mother paused, holding a bowl in her hands, then slowly placed it down. For a moment, it looked like she might speak. But instead, she shook her head and said it was not her place to explain. Her mother's words were gentle, but they cut deeply. That was when the woman realized something painful. Even the people who loved her were powerless. That night, she overheard raised voices outside their home. Her father was speaking to two elders. They talked about pressure, debts, and honor. They spoke of agreements that had already been discussed and promises that could not be broken. Her name came up again, followed by long pauses. She pressed her hand over her mouth to stop herself from crying out. Her heart raced as she understood that her future was being decided without her. She felt a strange mix of fear and disbelief. How could they plan her life as if she were not even there? She had dreams, thoughts, and feelings. She was not an object or a solution. But in their words, she was being discussed as a way to settle problems, to maintain peace, to protect the tribe's standing. The next morning, an elder called her to sit with the women of the family. They spoke calmly, using careful words. They told her that the tribe was facing difficult times and that sacrifices were sometimes necessary. They praised her character, her obedience, and her strength. At first, she felt proud hearing these words. Then she realized what they truly meant. They were preparing her to accept something she had not chosen. When she tried to ask questions, they gently stopped her. They said too much thinking would only bring pain. They told her to trust the wisdom of the elders just as generations before her had done. Their voices were calm, but their message was clear. Her opinion did not matter. Inside, her thoughts were screaming. She wanted to ask why she was the one chosen. She wanted to know what exactly was being decided. But fear held her silent. She had been taught that questioning elders brought shame, so she nodded even as her chest felt tight and her hands trembled. Over the next few days, preparations quietly began. Clothes were folded. Arrangements were discussed in low voices. She noticed unfamiliar faces visiting the village. Some looked at her with curiosity, others with judgment. Each glance made her feel smaller, like her identity was fading. She tried to speak to her father. She waited until he was alone, then asked him directly what was happening. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he sighed deeply and said the tribe's needs came before personal wishes. He told her this decision would bring stability and respect to their people. His words were firm, leaving no space for discussion. She realized that even his love for her could not stand against tradition. Tears filled her eyes, but she forced herself to remain calm. Crying would change nothing. She felt trapped between love and fear, between loyalty and the desire to be free. For the first time in her life, she felt truly alone. At night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Memories of her childhood filled her mind, the stories, the laughter, the belief that the tribe would always protect her. Now those memories felt distant, almost unreal. She wondered when exactly her value had been measured and traded for solutions to problems she never caused. She began to understand that the decision had already been made. The elders were not asking, they were informing. The future being planned did not include her happiness, only the tribe's survival. And in that world, her silence was expected. Each passing day made her fear stronger. Her steps felt heavier. Her voice grew quieter. People spoke about her future as if she were not present. She became a shadow in her own life. Still, deep inside, something refused to die. A small voice whispered that this was not right. That her life had meaning beyond agreements and traditions. That she deserved to be heard. But for now, she remained silent, standing at the edge of a decision she never agreed to, watching as her fate moved further out of her control. The day she feared finally arrived, though no one announced it clearly. It began like any other morning, with the sound of footsteps outside and quiet voices speaking in serious tones. But her heart felt heavy from the moment she opened her eyes. She knew something important was about to happen, even if no one had said it directly. Her mother helped her get ready in silence. She brushed her hair slowly, carefully, as if each movement carried pain. The young woman wanted to ask questions, but the words would not come out. Her throat felt tight. She could feel her mother's hands shaking, and that frightened her more than anything else. This was not how a normal day felt. When she stepped outside, she saw several elders gathered nearby. Some men stood at a distance, watching quietly. The air felt thick, and the usual sounds of village life seemed far away. She looked around, hoping to see a friendly face, someone who would explain what was happening. Instead, most people avoided her eyes. An elder spoke gently but firmly, telling her it was time. Time for what she wanted to ask, but her legs moved forward on their own, as if her body already understood before her mind could accept it. She felt like she was walking away from herself. As she was led through the village, memories rushed into her mind. She remembered running barefoot as a child, laughing without fear. She remembered believing that this place was her safe world. Now, each step felt like she was leaving that world behind forever. At the edge of the village, strangers waited. They did not look angry or cruel, but their presence filled her with dread. This was when the truth became impossible to ignore. She understood that she was being handed over, just like something that could be exchanged. Her heart pounded as she searched for her father's face. She saw him standing quietly, his expression serious and distant. She wanted him to stop everything, to say this was wrong, to take her home. Their eyes met for a brief moment. In that look, she saw pain, but no resistance. That hurt more than words ever could. Her breath became shallow, her hands trembled. She wanted to cry out, to beg someone to listen. But years of silence and obedience held her back. The weight of tradition pressed down on her, making it hard to move or speak. When the final words of agreement were spoken, her world seemed to pause. She felt like she was no longer standing on solid ground. People around her talked calmly, as if this was a normal exchange, as if a life was not being changed forever. Her mother stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. She hugged her tightly, whispering words of love and apology. The woman clung to her, wishing this moment would never end. But it did. Arms were gently but firmly pulled apart, and the separation felt like something tearing inside her. As she was guided away, she finally found her voice. It was soft at first, then filled with pain. She asked why this was happening, why no one had asked her, why her life mattered so little. Her words hung in the air unanswered. No one replied. Some looked away. Others stood silently, unable or unwilling to respond. That silence was the deepest betrayal. Not the act itself, but the refusal to acknowledge her humanity. In that moment, she realized that the tribe she trusted had chosen order over compassion, tradition over truth. The journey away from the village felt endless. With every step, the sounds of her old life faded. The land she knew disappeared behind her, replaced by uncertainty. She felt numb, like her emotions had shut down to protect her from the pain. She thought about all the times she had been told that loyalty was everything. Now, loyalty had taken everything from her. She wondered if obedience was truly a virtue when it erased a person's voice. As the hours passed, fear slowly turned into something else, clarity. She understood that what had been done could not be undone easily. But she also understood that silence had only helped others control her life. That realization planted a small seed inside her. She did not know what the future held. She did not know where she was going or what awaited her. But she knew one thing clearly now: what happened was not right. And knowing that truth, even quietly, gave her a sense of strength she had never felt before. As the sun set, she looked back one last time, even though the village was no longer visible. In her heart, she said goodbye, not just to a place, but to the version of herself who believed trust alone was enough to stay safe. This moment marked the end of her old life. The betrayal was complete. But deep inside, beneath the fear and sadness, a fragile determination began to grow. She had been treated as if she were nothing, but she was still human. And her story was not over yet. She was taken to felt strange and unfamiliar. The land looked different, the air felt heavier, and nothing around her carried the warmth of home. She stayed quiet, watching everything carefully. Fear walked beside her, but she tried not to let it show on her face. She had learned that showing fear only made people feel more powerful over her. The house she was brought into was larger than her old home, but colder in feeling. People spoke to her politely, yet their kindness felt distant, not personal. She was given instructions, not choices. Where to sit, when to eat, what to do. Every movement of her day was decided by someone else. It reminded her painfully that her life was no longer her own. At night, when the house finally grew quiet, her thoughts became loud. She lay awake on a thin mattress, staring into the darkness. Memories of her village returned again and again. She remembered her mother's hands, the smell of home, the sound of familiar voices. These memories were both comforting and painful. They reminded her of what she had lost and what she might never regain. Days passed slowly. She followed rules, learned new routines, and spoke only when spoken to. Inside, she felt empty, like a shell moving through time. Sometimes she wondered if anyone remembered her cries, or if her absence had already been accepted back home. That thought hurt deeply, but she forced herself to stay strong. Not everyone around her was unkind. One older woman in the house noticed her silence and sadness. She would sometimes sit near her and talk softly about small things, the weather, food, daily life. These moments did not fix anything, but they reminded her that kindness still existed in the world. Even a few gentle words felt like light entering a dark room. Still, fear remained her constant companion. She worried about her future, about what was expected of her, about how long this feeling of being trapped would last. She felt invisible, as if her thoughts and emotions no longer mattered. Some days she felt like she was slowly disappearing, but something unexpected began to happen. In the quiet moments when she was alone, her mind grew clearer. She started to understand that what happened to her was not her fault. For so long, she had been taught to accept blame and responsibility for decisions she never made. Now, she slowly began to separate herself from that belief. She started paying attention to small details. She noticed which people listened and which ones ignored her. She learned who could be trusted with simple conversations and who should be avoided. These observations gave her a small sense of control. Even in silence, she was learning how to protect herself. One afternoon, while helping with daily tasks, she overheard a conversation about another woman from a distant place who had spoken up for herself and found help. The story was shared casually, but it stayed with her. For the first time, she wondered if speaking up was truly impossible or just forbidden by fear. That thought scared her. Questioning her situation felt dangerous, but it also felt powerful. She had been raised to believe silence was strength. Now she wondered if silence had only made her invisible. At night, she whispered words to herself, reminding herself that she was still alive, still thinking, still feeling. She promised herself that no matter how small her voice was, she would not let it disappear completely. This promise became her secret strength. She began to show small signs of confidence. She stood a little straighter. She met people's eyes for a moment longer. These changes were tiny, almost unnoticeable, but to her they meant everything. They were proof that her spirit had not been broken. There were moments when fear returned strongly. On those days, she felt weak and tired, wondering if hope was foolish. But then she remembered the silence of the elders, the way her questions had been ignored. She realized that fear had protected others, not her, and that realization pushed her forward. She started finding ways to express herself safely, sometimes through writing small thoughts on scraps of paper she later destroyed. Sometimes through quiet prayers for strength and guidance. These acts reminded her that her inner world still belonged to her. Slowly, she began to understand that survival was not just about staying alive. It was about keeping her sense of self. Even if the outside world controlled her movements, her thoughts were still free. That freedom became her hidden weapon. She also began to notice that others around her carried their own silent struggles. She was not the only one hiding pain behind calm expressions. This understanding made her feel less alone and gave her compassion instead of bitterness. One evening, as she sat watching the sky change colors, she felt something new rise inside her. Not anger, not fear, but determination. She did not know how or when, but she believed that her story would not end in silence. She believed that one day her voice would matter. This belief did not erase her pain, but it gave it purpose. She stopped seeing herself only as a victim of decisions made by others. She began to see herself as a survivor in the making. Though her situation had not changed yet, she had changed inside. The woman who once believed obedience would keep her safe now understood that dignity came from within. And while the road ahead remained uncertain, she held onto one truth with growing strength. She was still human, still worthy, and still capable of choosing hope, even in the darkest moments. Time continued to move forward, even though many days felt the same. The woman woke up each morning with a quiet determination growing inside her. She no longer counted time by days or nights, but by small changes within herself. Each calm breath, each moment of courage felt like progress. She had learned that strength did not always come loudly. Sometimes it arrived softly and stayed. She began to notice opportunities, small, almost invisible chances to connect with the outside world. A short conversation with someone kind, a shared smile, a question asked without fear. These moments reminded her that she still existed beyond the role forced upon her. She was not just someone living quietly in a corner. She was a person with thoughts, memories, and a future waiting to be shaped. One day, she met someone who listened to her properly. This person did not interrupt or judge. They listened patiently as if her words truly mattered. At first, she spoke carefully, choosing each word with fear, but slowly her voice became steadier. Saying the truth out loud felt frightening yet freeing. For the first time, she felt seen. That moment changed something inside her. She realized that silence had protected others, not her. Speaking, even gently, was an act of courage. It did not bring instant freedom, but it brought clarity. She understood now that her story deserved to be heard, not hidden. She began to share her experiences in safe ways, trusting carefully, protecting herself while allowing her truth to exist. Each time she spoke, she felt a piece of her strength return. Her past no longer felt like a heavy secret. It became part of her identity, not her entire identity. The fear that once controlled her slowly lost its power. It did not disappear completely, but it no longer ruled her decisions. She learned to stand firm, to express herself with respect and confidence. People started to notice the change. They saw not a silent figure, but a woman with dignity. With time, help came from unexpected places. Kindness showed itself through actions, not promises. Support arrived not as a miracle, but as steady guidance. She learned that asking for help was not weakness. It was courage. It meant she valued her life enough to protect it. As her situation improved, she reflected on her journey. She remembered the girl who trusted without question, who believed silence was safety. That girl felt far away now. In her place stood someone wiser, stronger, and more aware. Pain had shaped her, but it had not destroyed her. She did not forget her tribe or her past. Instead of anger, she carried understanding. She knew that fear and tradition had guided their choices. But she also knew that wrong decisions, even when common, were still wrong. Forgiveness did not mean forgetting. It meant choosing peace over endless pain. She decided that her voice would no longer be quiet, not for anger, but for awareness. She wanted her story to matter, not just for herself, but for others who lived silently, believing they had no choice. She spoke about dignity, about listening, about the cost of ignoring a human voice. Her words reached people who needed them. Some listened with surprise, some with shame, some with hope. She understood that change was slow, but silence slowed it even more. Even one voice could begin a shift. She found purpose in helping others find their own strength. Sometimes that meant listening. Sometimes it meant encouraging. Sometimes it meant simply reminding someone that their life had value. In doing so, she healed herself. There were still difficult days. Healing was not simple or straight. Memories returned unexpectedly. Pain resurfaced without warning. But now she faced those moments with compassion for herself. She no longer blamed herself for surviving. She honored it. She learned to dream again, not careless dreams, but grounded ones. Dreams built on self-respect, independence, and peace. She imagined a future where she chose her path, where her voice guided her life. Looking back, she understood that the moment she was treated as nothing was not the end of her story. It was the moment her strength was tested, and she survived. She was no longer defined by what was taken from her. She was defined by what she rebuilt. Step by step, she reclaimed her identity, not loudly, not dramatically, but firmly. Her journey became proof that even when a person is silenced, their voice does not disappear. It waits, and when it finally rises, it carries truth, strength, and hope. She was once someone others decided for. Now she was someone who decided for herself, and that made all the difference.